Well, Misha, how are you doing this morning?
Well, thank you so much. Big fan of your podcast. Very delighted to be on.
Appreciate you taking the time to come on. Do you mind giving us a brief bio and some of the big ideas you're interested in?
Sure. So, some of the big ideas I'm interested in. I mean, professionally, I'm an investor. Stuff I read, though, sometimes it's like business or investor related stuff. But to be honest, I've been reading a lot of history, writing in my weekly newsletter around the books I read, or about Judaism, or about a lot of the kind of social dynamics that probably, in my view, generally go undernoticed, but seem to govern everything around us. Or, changes in the mating market, or male and female relations, or geopolitics, or echoes through US history, or just reading on World War II and the like. So, to be honest, pretty eclectic. I guess that's probably where I start. Given I write this weekly newsletter, that's kind of been growing nicely, and I find quite rewarding. But yeah, so like my writing and my intellectual journey, I describe as pretty eclectic.
I love that. One of the things that stood out to me when I first encountered your writing, which I really liked, was I've always had this sense that Peter Zeihan, I believe that's how you pronounce his name, I've only read it, he has this sense of the future as being very much it's going to play out. It's very definite. It's like, but there's not much we can do about it. It's just going to play out because there's these actors and it's all kind of predetermined, which I'm against, like, for some, like, I don't know, philosophical, or just like, I don't like it, personally. But it seems to be, and you picked up on that kind of notion that he has. It's all just determinism. What do you think about that? And how determined do you think we are by geography and these things? Is Australia, just blessed with these natural resources, and being an island for a long time? And all America is in a good place because we don't have land borders with any, of our enemies, and will eventually just be on top because of that. And there's nothing China can really do, this sense of like inevitability. Do you think that is accurate, or do we have more agency perhaps than Zeihan would like to believe?
Yeah, it's a great question. So you're referring to a book review I wrote comparing his book with Bruno Makesh's book, and basically Zeihan's book that you're referring to is Disunited Nations, in a series on this, and he's kind of famous for being very much a geographic determinist, and basically saying your neighbors, your energy dependence, whether you're an energy importer or exporter, whether you're food dependent or independent, and like kind of determine your future. And I think that's extremely powerful, frankly. And I think in the same way, when you kind of read Jared Diamond's Guns, Germs and Steel is effectively geographic determinist outlook, I think it's very seductive, and it's quite powerful. I think, and I think you kind of get to the crux of it, probably the fundamental philosophical question. And I don't really have an ideological view. I find kind of both sides seductive in different ways, and it's hard to know what the real truth is. But your fundamental question is, are we just really led along by the winds of geography, or do we kind of exert human will onto the world, and can we wrap the world according to our own needs? Are we genuine free agents or not? So obviously this is a massive question, and I obviously do not sit here with the answer, but it's interesting to kind of understand the shape of these questions, and it's interesting to kind of note the kinds of folks who are attracted to one or the other. I find the more interesting, for example, VC or investor folks or founders, who are really, their kind of worldview is shaped by their belief in the founder as this person kind of exerting the will to power onto the world. They're quite repulsed by this idea that we simply, and I know you're a founder, so this is
yes,
yes. And it's probably why founders are probably conservative as well in a sense. Like there's obviously Judeo-Christian, deep Judeo notion of free will, which kind of comes into this, and so the idea is that no, actually we determine our fate, rather than, oh, how lucky you are that, you were born here. But then again, a lot of the ideas are almost indisputable, like the Aboriginal Australian, it's hard to imagine not giving the Aboriginal Australian 1 million years or 10 million years and building civilization, not because of any inherent defects in the person, but rather they simply didn't have domesticable animals. Probably, I don't know if you can domesticate a kangaroo over a long enough time span or whatever, but directionally, you don't have access to the minerals you need, and you don't have the geographic support to kind of create a civilization. So, I think that the truth is probably some strange mix of both. And I obviously don't have the answer, but it's interesting to kind of lean into either side.
Definitely. And it does seem to be the argument I always have with people. It does seem to be that even if it is the case that everything's determined, you should still probably act like you have a lot of agency because that maximizes your chances for having a positive outcome.
Yeah, this is this is one of those high school. I remember debating this. When you come across this, you kind of get really into it. It's a deep question. So we're not going to solve it now, but fundamentally, no one really lives their life as if it were truly deterministic. So it's kind of irrelevant. How do you do that? Because even if you believe it, and even if you act according to it, well, what does that even mean? It's kind of. It's so saturating of everything that it kind of becomes meaningless. Sam Harris had this absolutely idiotic claim once, which kind of turned me off him 5 or 6 years ago, where he basically said, look, the universe is not deterministic. You try and... Oh, no, he was saying it is deterministic. You go lie down and see how long you can lie there for. No, you'll get up and go back to business. And it just totally misses the point, okay, of what it all means. So, I think you're right. I think it kind of cancels itself out in terms of informing your decisions. And so, I think, people, your best... It's almost like a Pascal's wager. It's really only upside in betting on agency. You are better off not blaming the universe and others on kind of your actions. Whether it's fundamentally true or not is probably unknowable, but you are better off acting as if you are the author of your actions.
That makes sense. That makes quite a lot of sense. Misha, I want to pivot a little bit and talk about something interesting. So, you're an investment manager, you make investments for a living. How do you think about finding alpha? Do you systematically, do you have a system for doing that? I was recently reading Soros's book on, it has all this concept like reflexivity, et cetera, and how, groups of people make decisions and how that can affect markets. Do you have a systematic way about thinking about how to find alpha? And perhaps that's kind of fraught with peril because, no one would ever talk about this publicly, right? But, perhaps you could talk in general terms about how you think about these things.
Yeah. So, the micro kind of matters here. I'm a private equity investor, which is very different to, public market investors who, might have many positions and take small positions in liquid stocks and kind of have to periodically take views, and it's hyper competed. I guess, they're also private equity firms, so it's not not a competitive market. It's a competitive market globally, but it's really kind of opportunity specific.
Gotcha.
It's kind of opportunity specific, sector specific, geography specific, and so it's kind of hard to talk about it in general terms. We don't kind of match an index and try to generate 2% over because we're not in listed equities, so that's a totally foreign language. To us, it's really can we build something, a position in a market where we're attracting and generating opportunities that are kind of, down our kind of fairway that we can kind of execute on and generate the requisite returns and take a view on those assets. So, it's kind of like a very blah kind of statement I kind of gave you, but I work for a software and technology private equity firm, so the side position is a specific sector focus, and so I'm bullish on the sector, and so that's kind of like my starting position. So it's like that's the macro position, that's the only sector you're kind of playing in, so you're choosing that, and then within that, there are countless factors around, the particular vertical within technology you're kind of focusing on, the kind of, the founders you might be partnering with, or the management teams, or whatever. So I think you just got to believe ultimately that you can kind of make 3 times or whatever you're targeting, and there's just a lot of ingredients that go into that pot.
Gotcha. It's very case by case, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to be too general. I think so when firms market themselves, they'll certainly talk about this grand strategy that they pursued and look at their track record and how wonderfully that all falls within that. And if you can't talk to them every 6 months or every 18 months, magically there's a different grand strategy that they've been pursuing for 10 years, and it's kind of worked out exactly as they said. And that's because these narratives are retrofitted, because,
Gotcha.
First of all, the sample sizes are too small, you're inherently opportunistic, and the world changes, and life's messy, and there's always a bit of luck or whatever, or the macro changes or whatever, and so the truth is that everyone's kind of scrambling to make something fit, but then every time you speak to them, there's this wonderful, neat narrative in a bow in hindsight, and that's kind of fine. I mean, as humans, it's like an investing charlatan thing. That's just how we tell stories, and that's kind of fine.
Right.
But it's just hard to be really honest with a really clear cut story. I think investors tend to just be try to figure it out, as they go along, and there's a lot of path dependence around the kind of skills and relationships you build along the way that you can deploy in the next opportunity.
Gotcha. That makes sense. It seems to me that perhaps this is tangential, but Elon Musk's great skill is storytelling at some level. It lets him raise excess amounts of capital, et cetera, and then you get this if you're very good at telling these compelling narratives, it's really important.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of see it as part of a broader thing. He's a perfect example of being a man who can exert his will to wrap the fabric of the universe around him. Not to be too kind of grandiose, but storytelling, whether to investors or to employees or to co-founders or to CEOs or to the press or whatever, it's one thing, okay? It's one thing you're doing to kind of create something from nothing. And that can't have been it all, because, he's deployed hard engineering skills across the opportunities. And look, and you get a whole bunch of, false positives, or I don't know if it's the other way around, but there's always a whole bunch of bullshit as well that he's kind of, said that hasn't really worked out, or is kind of pretty dodgy or whatever. But you kind of got enough truth there. Yeah, you're going to have truth that it's a real thing. And maybe they're both sides of the same coin. Maybe if you are going to tell big yarns and also have something to back it up, some of that's going to work out, some it's not. And so you kind of got to take it in aggregate. It's probably unfair to kind of call them out for not having done anything with neural nets or something. I don't even know the status of that,
right,
without crediting him for building SpaceX.
Right.
It's pretty astonishing.
Absolutely. I think you're on the money there. I want to take another change of pace here and talk about social norms between men and women and how they've evolved over time. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you think about that?
Social norms. I mean, I haven't categorized social norms, and I guess the way I think about male-female relations is probably several fold, just kind of linking it to things I've written about recently.
Yeah.
One, I recently kind of was reading it. I was reading about the Comanches, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. I was reading about like the Lakotas, and I was reading like the Hebrew Bible, and I was like, where has all the polygamy gone? Like there's kind of polygamy everywhere. Like our history across societies and across time is saturated with polygamy. And I look around and like if you mention polygamy, people are like, what is that? Like it's so invisible. It's not even offensive. It's just like totally
gone,
invisible. It has been exterminated. And so I kind of picked up Joe Henrich's book, the weirdest people.
Excellent book.
Basically Western democratic, whatever else it is. And actually he paints a pretty compelling story about how the church effectively, accidentally stamped it out, like completely exterminated. And the interesting thing about polygamy is you can't even have, like a society with like 20% polygamy is a fully polygamous society, because it's the top 20% of men who can't collect and hoard all these wives who will do so, and then you've got this kind of incels who can't, and they become violent, and it's not a stable equilibrium. And so that's why you kind of have a society with just like 5%. Like it actually has to be zero, which is kind of an interesting feature of it. And so I guess the way I kind of see it, it's not uncommon as a kind of a joke comment, like when a couple get married, someone have a throwaway line about how she had to break the man in, or how she had to domesticate him, so to speak. Like it might be you might say that not in a callous, in a fun, jovial way. Yeah, he was so domesticated before he was married or whatever it was.
Right.
I unironically think we can treat that literally. I think men were domesticated as were dogs and as were horses, and they were once kind of roving, violent, polygamous men, and eventually these kind of institutions accidentally sprung up to kind of constrain elite men, which is kind of remarkable in itself. How does society kind of organically develop in a way that constrains its strongest, most powerful, most violent cohort? Okay, and so Christian institutions basically evolved in order to do that. And now, someone might be kind of snarky about that, but fundamentally, my view is that just like oxen are kind of yoked to kind of plow fields, men have effectively been yoked to build civilization. Okay, and so it is almost an unequivocal good. Like the reason we're having this conversation over over these machines, and this like indistinguishable from magic technology, is because we effectively stopped trying to hoard wives and kill each other, and instead directed that energy towards civilization building. So that's probably like the one kind of 1,000-year, and I've kind of written this like 12,000 word, piece on this kind of diving into how Native American tribes looked at it, how kind of Jews historically have looked at it. Just out of, again, it just kind of happened to be reading about these things that kind of stitched together rather than any kind of conspiracy or whatever. But it's interesting, what I just described to you. It almost sounds weird, like it almost sounds conspiratorial maybe or whatever, but we are so immersed in this is the water we swim in, and we don't even notice it, that this is kind of what's happened. And so I find that to be like the kind of, it's not like a 10-year thing, it's kind of the big long year thing. Then the other piece of it, I think effectively modern dating has broken that down. I think hookup apps have effectively broken that, and for a few reasons. I think one, so we kind of believe now in this what I call pseudo-polygamous society, where the top echelon of men basically have the Uber Eats model of dating, and they can basically get women delivered to their homes, and how wonderful is that, and happy days. partly because of the technology, partly also it's just more discreet, like it's not going to the bar, the common bar everyone's at every week. It's just that, like, the discretion is a part of the new model, and so men kind of can hide their success. The guys who aren't getting any, which is most men, can kind of hide their shame, and women can hide that promiscuity. And so it kind of works in this strange way where everyone has an incentive to stay mum about it, and so you've kind of got this quiet bubbling of this pseudo polygamy. Now the challenge is that and you kind of see it everywhere. I'm not saying it's like the only cause, but it's totally consistent with the story of delayed family formation, declining birth rates, delayed marriage and the like. It's totally consistent with that story. And part of the challenge is that pseudo-polygamy is in many ways much worse than real polygamy because it has all the social costs and none of the upsides, because these men are not providing for multiple wives, they're not providing for hordes of children, they're not providing for extended families. It's like costless. It's like totally wild. And by the way, I should say, it's a trap for them. Like, it's easy to kind of get stuck on that hamster wheel, but ultimately society has for a reason developed these kind of long dated norms of marriage and like, because you don't want to be this 45-year-old loser trying to sleep with like 30-year-olds or 25-year-olds or whatever. Like, actually, over the long run, you also want kids and you want grandkids, and it's hard to kind of bridge that gap without a range of social norms. And you just get stuck in this hamster wheel and kind of... So ultimately, it's not even for their benefit, but the kind of breakdown of these long-dated norms is kind of propelling every cohort into these strange local minima.
Got it. So on the margin, should we just encourage more people to get married? This is something I'm a big fan of.
Yeah, I think so. Like, I mean, you almost should trust it because I'm married and I've been, I've got 3 kids and congratulations. And, and I've been out of the market. So in some respect, everyone's always kind of talking their book a little bit here. So like, it's always impossible to distinguish whether I'm, am I a resentful guy just having a crack, or it's like a objective thing? So like, I'll caveat. I mean, people could kind of make their own judgment. I think kids are like unequivocally the greatest joys a man can experience, and I'm baby maximalist. I've got 3, and God willing, we'll have many more. But like, who knows, right? But like, but to the extent you should trust me, don't know. But yeah, I mean, I think fundamentally, marriage solves a lot of these issues. Like, I mean, the kids thing is this strange cheat code where you kind of get this little bundle of meaning that's kind of unquestioned. Like I mean, everyone's had kids forever. It's the most kind of ubiquitous experience in human history, almost by definition. And yet, to you, it is non-fungible. It is one-off. It kind of delivers everything. There is no more existential angst. I mean, yet I'm 34, maybe this midlife crisis thing or whatever. Like, we can talk about it again in 20, 30 years, who knows? But just speaking from where I am today, you're just too busy trying to like get to the next day and trying to like eke out whatever you can from work or wherever else to kind of worry about all the other stuff you were worried about before. So I'm very bullish marriage and kids, especially. So and kids without marriage doesn't really work. So I think that's the kind of that's the bundle you want to kind of go for.
Can you talk a little bit about kids without marriage doesn't really work? I'm also a big proponent of this. I think it's very important, and it's something our society, we at least in the West, have kind of stopped pushing a lot. And I think it's important, if it is possible, for parents to be married.
Well, I guess like I think I'm totally guilty of this. Like, I've been guilty of underrating the importance of kind of symbolic, ceremonial, traditional things, just across the board. I don't need to get too specific, but I'm absolutely hands up guilty of that. And, in hindsight, every single time I reflect on it, it's a mistake. And I think it's almost like a Chesterton's fence thing. Like, I think it's for people like us to kind of grow up curious about stuff and reflecting, a lot of it just seems like bullshit. And until you realize in hindsight that these things matter. I'll give you a totally unrelated example, okay? Stalin, one of his crowning moments of power and coronation was when Lenin died. He had the body embalmed, and there was this whole state ceremony around it. Now, Lenin won, fucking Stalin shot and thrown in a ditch somewhere, basically.
Right.
But, but Stalin seized the moment,
the opportunity,
and created this coronation. Now, an autist might ask, what are you talking about? A bunch of people stood in a room and kind of spoke to each other.
Stupid.
But that's actually not how humans work. Humans work these things, these symbolic things, these kind of group ceremonies and rituals hold real power. And so Stalin created a coronation and seized power. Now, these are ethereal concepts, but the same thing is marriage, and the same thing is all these other ceremonies where you have an opportunity to forge a new dynamic and to define certain enduring elements in your life and your family's lives. And I think these, we are bereft today of rituals and ceremonies, and you kind of see it everywhere. People are hungry for rituals, and so I think I don't know how we kind of got onto this, but I think you asked about marriage, so I think marriage is important from that perspective. I mean, can you have a good family without ever getting technically married? 100%. Okay, that's absolutely fine. Frankly, I think we live in this deranged moment where a lot of women, a lot of my friends who are women, who are in their late 30s or mid 30s, and they speak to me and they say, Misha, they lied to us. I was wrong 10 years ago. I thought, I'm going to have this great career and I'm going to whatever. And now there's some miserable lawyer somewhere at a great law firm without a partner with despicable mating market opportunities, and they're miserable. And of course, why on earth would you want to be a miserable lawyer somewhere earning some irrelevant amount of money instead of creating a family with someone? Like we live in this deranged moment where saying that is somehow a conservative position or whatever. You need to be conservative to kind of stay on the face of it. You have to be a miserable corporation to tell someone that actually you're much better off working for me instead of creating human life and rearing human life. And so we live in this moment where, so women, I've got some friends now who are in this situation where, they're kind of pessimistic on finding a partner, and they're going to have a child alone. Okay, through technology or whatever. And frankly, I think that's a great second best outcome. Ideally, you kind of have a mum and dad and a partner, whatever. Second best option, totally legitimate, is having a child another way, because children are really, I'm so bullish on children. That instinct and that option, considering what options available, that is legitimate. I don't know, this is probably a very unkosher view, and I apologize to my rabbi and whoever else, but I think I'm not this isn't a purist conservative spiel I'm giving. I just think have children, otherwise you'll be miserable, basically. So
10 out of 10.
Yeah, and so I mean, you could kind of tackle the question another way, broken families, it's tough. Obviously, large dysfunctional communities across the world, part of the reasons for their dysfunction is because of kind of broken institutions. I wrote about, I read this great biography of Clarence Thomas, obviously Supreme Court judge. And
was it My Grandfather's Son or something?
No, it's called.
No, sorry.
It's called. I think he might have written that. That's audio. Okay. I read a biography about him.
Okay,
it's called The Enigma of Clarence Thomas, and it's excellent. And the author doesn't like him and doesn't really politically align with him.
Yes.
And to the author's absolute credit, Thomas's charisma and wisdom shines through, and he could see what was happening, the decimation that was happening to the black family, and I didn't realize until I read this, but how patriarchal black society was at the time. And in hindsight, Malcolm X, the Black Panthers, these are deeply charismatic, masculine figures and movements. And now you kind of go to like a Trump march or Black Lives Matter march, and it's like pussy hats and whatever else. Like you don't have that anymore. And so you had this decimation of the black man and correspondingly the breaking of the black family and I mean, this is a way bigger issue than but I just found that kind of striking. And so like communities that don't have marriage norms don't seem to be going very well. So anyway, I know that's like a lot on marriage, but you did.
Yes, absolutely. No, I love that. And Misha, if you don't mind me asking, are you religious yourself?
Look, I'm always, again, I find it like hard to kind of answer this question. I think like, if you're in the top 1 or 5% of anything, you'll know people who are 10x, 100x what you are. And so, like, am I religious? I mean, I guess compared to, like, probably the average. Am I religious compared to, like, an actual Orthodox Jew and, like, Chabad rabbi or something? Like, absolutely not. Like, I'm kind of directionally, I go to synagogue every Saturday, which I find very rewarding. I put on tefillin, whatever. So, like, I'm I guess that puts me, definitely on the more religious side of, and I keep kosher, all that kind of stuff. So that puts me on the more religious side of things. And I've read an essay, Why Practice Judaism as well, kind of specifically to kind of hit that on the head. It's not proselytizing. It's not to folks such as yourself, but it was written to my congregation at the request of my rabbi, and but that kind of lays out why I think Jews might find it more rewarding to practice.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So. Geez, I'm going to pull up messages, just read it to you. But no, I'm not going to do that. I guess someone once said, I think it was like Esther Perel or someone like that. I don't remember. But on marriage, they said, marriage is when love isn't enough. Is for when love isn't enough. Okay? And, I don't mean to make it sound bleak. Okay? I just think... the covenant, what that means is, the way I hear that is that the covenant of marriage and the kind of formal structures and rituals of marriage create rails for a long-term relationship. The best paragraph I've ever read on marriage is in Yoram Hazony's book on the virtues of nationalism. Right, which is an odd thing to say, but he has this extended, beautiful framework about, how you might think you're making a choice going into a marriage. You choose a partner, you say, I do. Like, there's this kind of artifice of consent around it, but there is absolutely no way. Like you are not meaningfully consenting to what lies ahead of you over decades. The kind of but both the ups, yes, many joyous, happy, great things, but the tribulations as well. And I think marriage creates those guardrails. And I see the analogy the same in religion. Religion is for when God isn't enough. Okay, and again, I don't mean that to be too heretical here, but I think that the rituals and customs that that religion is wrapped in provide a deep structure for meaning, for community, for tradition. My kids love going to synagogue. I don't think any of your listeners will go to my synagogue, but it's a lovely synagogue, but it's quite geriatric. It's kind of an aging, slowing community. It's not there are many young, vibrant communities across here, but the one that happens to be walking distance to my home is older. And again, everyone there is fantastic. My kids are the only ones there. They love it. They have the best time. They go there. It's a ritual I get to do with them. Friday night, we have Shabbat, just our family together. So there are certain songs and there are certain prayers and melodies that are just beautiful that you repeat every week. You say the Kaddish, you say a mourner's Kaddish 3 or 4 times, I don't remember exactly, on a Saturday morning. And folks who are in mourning, they say it out loud, you say it with them. A few weeks ago, there was a gentleman, his wife just died. He wept as he said it. He was an old gentleman, and he said, I'll love her forever, basically, to me. And I'm standing there in awe at this man. It's almost painful to look at him and stare and to witness such beauty. And, these moments, and they come in different shapes and sizes, kind of permeate these spaces. And where else do you get that? What am I going to be doing instead of going out to brunch?
Right.
This is not for everyone. This is not for you, probably. But for me, this is my tradition. And I kind of, and I found tremendous meaning leaning into it. I think from a kind of a macro knowledge perspective, like we've kind of talked about that part. I think Jewish body of knowledge is enormous, going back thousands of years across infinite amounts of commentaries and counter commentaries and debates and arguments. Now, there's a whole bunch of stuff there, like sacrifice is half the mitzvahs, half the good deeds you can do, and they're all basically redundant now officially because we don't have a temple at the moment. And so, there's just a random example. There's obscure and there are mystical parts or whatever, but it's so big, okay, and it's so underrated. No one talks about it. No one's knowledgeable in this stuff. If you just pick it up and read some of it, it holds tremendous value, and it's a way to anchor yourself to things that are permanent. Partly it's a selection bias. You surface things that have kind of worked and have continued to work. But that's kind of the point. That's okay. You shouldn't read everything. You shouldn't. Right. There's a whole bunch of stuff. Don't worry about it. But if you surface the good stuff, it's complete alpha. It is what I consider it pure knowledge and spiritual alpha lying on the sidewalk. That's available for you. And I'm certain it's the same for other traditions. It's not like a Judaism thing. Whatever your tradition is, if you just start to take parts of it, or you need the right posture towards it that suits you. Some people, you can't take it too literally, or some people need to take it really literally, or whatever it is, whatever your kind of exact mix of seriousness and irony and introspection and selection, you need to find the right entry point. But if you find the right entry point, as I have, as my family have, I found it tremendously rewarding.
That's great. That's great. I do think that's a really important sentiment you just expressed. And it seems like people still they always consistently underrate this. It's the selection pressure of a very large amount of time on any tradition or knowledge base can craft very important truths that you should go out and seek out. But it seems like we ignore it. We're always trying to read the thing that just came out. But it seems like we should be much more biased to reading older texts. Yeah,
I think so. I mean, most people don't read at all, right? Or they read whatever. That's most people, and I mean that's kind of fine. I think the way these institutions have been built are to be mass, or community events. I'm just reading A History of Texas right now. Okay.
Nice.
By Fehrenbach, and it's fantastic. It's called The Lone Star State, something. It's fantastic. And so, it's saying how, whilst, all the kind of Texan rednecks, weren't, particularly educated, whatever, they had a high literacy rate, and, they read the Bible, and they were, and they kind of saw through high-talking charlatans, kind of partly as a result. These are, when Luther first mass published his leaflets, it wasn't talking to the priests, it was talking to the masses. When under Charlemagne, they began mass producing the Bible, again, it was to kind of arm priests to create local communities with just average peasants, and these kind of spread literacy. And so these are mass. This is not for a priestly Brahmin class. This is for the masses, and it's kind of worked. And I think in this moment where we're addicted to our screens, when there are no more. Someone pointed out to me. They said there are no more places for men to get together. That synagogue is one of them. Like I go to Orthodox synagogue, and men and women are segregated. So that's like kind of one. But and he pointed out only synagogues and strip clubs. That's where men congregate, and I only go to one of those. But the point is, we've got some male clubs, gentlemen clubs, in a literal sense, not strip clubs, whatever they're called here, and it looks pretty miserable to me, to be honest. I don't really want to go have lunch with a bunch of dusty old business dudes. Okay, it's not really my thing. But this is kind of periodic annual rage in newspapers about how these things exist, and it's 50 meters down from a female gym, which no one has a problem with, okay? And again, I just think the current zeitgeist is increasingly hostile to, basic male needs and the kind of asymmetry between, different preferences of the genders, basically. And so I think you need to create those spaces to allow you to do that. Maybe in some communities going to the pub, maybe someone who's going to church, maybe unions. Unions were pretty, masculine kind of movements, whatever it was. But in this moment, we don't have many of them. And so I think, whatever your jam, you've just got to kind of create your own.
That's great. I think that's well put, and an important note we definitely miss nowadays. Misha, I want to observe something I find interesting, and this just could be 100% selection effects. There seems to be a vertical of people who are very smart. They read Scott Alexander, kind of less wrong adjacent, but much more generally like Scott a lot more, and are religious. I think, Resident Contrarian, my friend Resident, Lars Doucet, he's an Eastern Orthodox, a good friend of mine. He won the book review contest. You are religious yourself, Jeff Hubert. I can keep going down the list. Quite a few people. Do you think there is something about Scott's writing that is intuitive to people who are smart, religious, interested in these kinds of issues, like to think about things, or is it just selection effects? They're people like me, and that's why I kind of gravitate to them.
Yeah, he's probably surveyed this, and he's probably got the answer.
I could probably look it up. Exactly right.
We could actually look it up what the answer is.
Yeah.
He's an atheist, I think, and I think he's not religious at all.
Yeah.
I think, I think it's probably I'd guess his readership skews right wing. I don't really know why. I think he'd probably reject that label. He's
a social democrat himself.
Yeah. So, but I suspect I'm actually not sure why. I think, and this might be self-serving and this might be bullshit, but there's just something about the way of calling a spade and trying to seek truth for its own sake rather than kind of couched in social niceties that kind of is more attractive to that crowd. I don't know if that's true. I imagine the right wing has its own kind of derangements and its own kind of social niceties that it requires conformity to. I imagine. So I don't know if that's a bit cute to say that. I guess my short answer is I have absolutely no idea. And it probably is a bit of a selection effect of you just kind of plucking out folks you're interested in, and it happened to be like that. But I'm not sure what drives these readerships. They're very powerful. I've had a few folks reach out to me, and I've had coffee or whatever about people from either Australia or overseas, or they happen to be in town or something, and they kind of came across me first on Scott Alexander's blog or elsewhere. And these things, and it's quite a diverse group of folks. And I mean, it is interesting. Like it's kind of the magic of the internet. I mean, one reason I write, frankly, is because I write pretty eclectically about a broad range of things.
Love it.
And I'm fortunate that I'm able to share it with people who care instead of because they self-select into it rather than harassing my mates or like people who are like, "What are you talking about, Misha?" And so and that's been absolute blessing. I make absolutely no money from it. It's purely a passion project, and we've got no pathway to being kind of financially rewarding, but it's enormously personally rewarding. And I get emails from folks with who I can kind of build rapport and connect with, and that's rewarding.
I love that. And the same reason I run this podcast is get to talk to interesting people I wouldn't otherwise, be able to and learn from them. Well, Misha, thanks so much for taking the time today. Where can people find you? Where should we send them?
Yeah, so I think I've been talking about my newsletter a lot. So I guess that's probably the starting place. It's called Kvetch, Kvetch. And Kvetch in Yiddish basically means having a whinge. So like, as you can hopefully tell, like none of this we should be taking kind of too seriously, and it's basically where I just write about all these kinds of subjects or whatever I'm reading at the time. It's free to subscribe. Otherwise, I'm probably like tweeting about stuff. So, check it out.
We'll put a link down in the show notes. Well, thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Brilliant. Thanks for having me on.